yesterday. There was some bombing with possibly gas exposure in Syria, and things have changed. It reminds me sort of weather reports. Well, if you don't like the weather, just wait an hour. You'll get different weather. Well, that's sort of what happens in the Middle East sometimes. Just wait, it'll change. And actually, before this episode of possible gas exposure and who did what, things were going along reasonably well for the conditions. Trump says let the Syrians decide who should run their country, and peace talks were breaking out, and al-Qaeda and ISIS were on the run.
Hold it now. And again, Anderson, we are now able to report that U.S. airstrikes have been launched against Bashar al-Assad's chemical weapons capability. We are being told by a senior official at this hour that approximately 50 Tomahawk missiles from 2 U.S. Navy warships in the Mediterranean launched earlier this evening.
President Trump overnight fired off 59 Tomahawk missiles on Syria, going against his previous position not to get involved in the Syrian civil war, that not to focus on America and not go bombing and intervening all over the world. That was one thing that progressives, war-weary Americans liked about Trump. His tone over the campaign was, we need to stop focusing on spreading democracy all around the world. We need to focus on building airports here and hospitals here and fixing the roads here and focusing on America. I kind of thought it was BS then, and now it's proving that it's BS. But we'll get to Trump in a minute. But some of our old favorites have come out of hiding now, cheering on what President Trump is doing. Hillary Clinton.
As I said yesterday afternoon, it is essential that the world does more to deter Assad from committing future murderous atrocities. But the action taken last night needs to be followed by a broader strategy to end Syria's civil war and to eliminate ISIS strongholds on both sides of the border. So I hope this administration will move forward in a way that is both strategic and consistent with our values.
Wow. That is the real danger, but right now, from my viewpoint, and a few others, maybe more than a few, see this as just a sort of a victory for the neoconservatives who have been looking for Assad has to go, and who is it that wants to get rid of him? And you have to look for that, who's involved in that, and that's, I think, unfortunately, the ones who are winning out on this, and the radicals are winning too, the people who have been trying to get rid of Assad as well. So there was a bit of hypocrisy going on here because, in 1 minute we say that, well, maybe Assad has to stay, the next day he has to go. And yes, we're over there fighting ISIS and al-Qaeda. At the same time, what we end up doing by these bombs, we've actually strengthened them. So it is a mess, and that is why I work so hard in America to present the case for non-interventionism, mind our own business. There are problems around the world, but I do not believe the American people and our American government should be the policemen of the world. It makes no sense. It causes us more trouble and more grief. It causes us more financial problems because of this. It's not in our self-interest, and it's hardly a way that we can defend our Constitution and liberty. It is not for that reason. There are other motives for this, and to understand clearly how they're thinking, I can't tell you that, but I do know that the results are not very good for the American people.
And where does it leave the peace talks?
Yeah, the peace talks, of course, have been ended now. They were afraid, they were terrified that peace was going to break out. Al-Qaeda was on the run. Peace talks were being entertained with, and all of a sudden it had to change. And this changed things dramatically, the whole event. And I do not expect them anytime soon or in the distant future to prove that Assad would be so stupid as to do this. why would he do it? You know, it was zero benefit to him to participate in it. And but the headlines here, United States says Assad's killing his own people, killing his own people.
The United States and its coalition partners have been bombing ISIS in Iraq and in Syria. It's supporting the Iraqi army in its efforts to liberate Mosul from ISIS. How can you say that the United States is supporting ISIS?
Can you explain to me how could they defeat ISIS in Iraq and ISIS was expanding since the American coalition started attacking Syria?
Now?
It's been expanding. No,
is it expanding now?
It started shrinking after the Russian intervention, not the American one. How could they use our oil fields and export with thousands of barrel trucks to Turkey without being seen by your drones and by your satellites, while the Russians could be able to do so and attack them and destroy all their facilities? How? This is cosmetic campaign against ISIS.
Just to be clear, I have shown you the FBI report. I've shown you the photographs. I've shown you the Amnesty International report. Will you cooperate in investigations to determine if these very serious reports are in fact true?
You showed me many things, but you didn't show me a single evidence.
I showed you an FBI report.
No, it's not evidence at all. It's actually the contrary. Any American institutions for us during the Syrian crisis was against the realities, was the opposite of the truth. That's how we look at it. So it's not Syrian institution, we don't care about what they say. For me, what I care about is what reports I have from Syrian people. And we had investigations because we have many claims regarding not the mass crimes, actually more individual acts. And we've been investigating many, and many people were punished. But that happened in every war.
Are you disturbed enough about any of this to try to determine the truth yourself?
I think you should show it to the Western officials to ask them that question. Are they disturbed to see what's happening since they started supporting the terrorists in Syria, this killing and this destruction? That's the question. Of course I'm disturbed. I'm Syrian. I have this natural...
you are disturbed about this? About these reports?
What's happening in Syria? No, not about the report.
Not about this?
No.
Okay.
I'm disturbed about what's happening in Syria. It's my country. It's been destroyed by proxy terrorists.
So it's a little confusing, though, if you take 3 steps back from Syria. So here we are fighting, there are 2 main players in this. The biggest ones would be the ISIL-backed forces and the government of Assad.
Exactly right.
And we're fighting both of them. Meanwhile, we're arming a third force which has ties to al-Qaeda.
Okay, so what are the threats to America coming from Syria? Right. Do you agree ISIL is a threat to America?
Sure. I mean, I don't think anyone's supporting ISIS. The question is, what's the best way to
I'm saying that the only way to destroy the caliphate is for somebody to go on the ground and kill them.
But we seem to be fighting both sides. No one would disagree that Bashar al-Assad is, of course, killing far more members of ISIS than we have.
No.
Right.
No,
but now we're fighting him too, so you can imagine why the average person is a little confused.
He's not killing ISIL, he's killing the opposition. Assad is a threat to the region and eventually a threat to us because he's backed by Iran.
But he's a secular leader who's against ISIS. We're against ISIS.
Right. So. He's a puppet of the Iranians.
Sure, that's okay. And Russians are formed too.
Iran is run by a religious fanatic. Iran's not a secular state. Iran has missiles on the side of which they write death to Israel. I think the Obama deal with Iran is the worst deal since Munich. I think Assad is a puppet of the Iranians, and the Arabs are not going to accept giving Damascus to the Iranians. And as long as Assad is in power, ISIL and al-Qaeda can't be destroyed. I tell you, audience.
But hold on. I'm just losing. I just want to see if I understand this. So I can't tell who the main enemy is here. You've said that ISIL is the main enemy.
The main enemy, I think.
And then you said Iran is the main enemy, but they're fighting each other. So
not really. So
I'm confused.
Okay, radical Sunni Islam hates the Iranians because they're a bunch of Shiites.
Right.
They hate us too. How are we connected here? Radical Islam and the Sunni side did 9/11. I don't think Iran is going to attack us tomorrow, but I think if they had a nuclear capability, they would share it with terrorist organizations, and our homeland would be at risk. They chant death to America, so both pose a threat in a different way. But I'm more worried about Iranian expansion right now than I am ISIL in Mosul and Raqqa.
Okay, so I thought you were more worried about ISIS. That's why I was a little bit confused. So, but wouldn't it be the perfect scenario if we have two enemies who are fighting each other to not intervene in that conflict because we're the beneficiary of our enemies killing each other?
Not at all, because the bottom line is that Assad's not trying to take down the caliphate.
It's hard to know exactly what's happening in Syria right now. I'd like to know specifically how that release of chemical gas, if it did occur, and it looks like it did, how that occurred. Because frankly, I don't think Assad would have done that. It does not serve his interests. It would tend to draw us into that civil war even further.
Who do you think is behind it? Who do you think is behind it?
You know, you've got a war going on over there. Supposedly, that airstrike was on an ammo dump, and so I don't know if it was released because there was gas stored in the ammo dump or not. That's plausible. I'm not saying that's what I think happened, but
You're more inclined to believe the position of what Bashar al-Assad is saying and what the Russians are saying right now than more inclined to believe what even your colleagues here in the United States believe is truth, that this is Assad, and what human rights observers over there say is Assad?
I don't think it would have served Assad's purposes to do a chemical attack on his people. So it's hard for me to understand why he would do that if he did.
Fareed, it's day 78 of the Trump presidency. What changed last night?
I think Donald Trump became president of the United States. I think this was actually a big moment because candidate Trump had said that he would never get involved in the Syrian civil war. He told President Obama, you cannot do this without the authorization of Congress. He seemed unconcerned with global norms. President Trump recognized that the President of the United States does have to act to enforce international norms, does have to have this broader moral and political purpose. President Trump realized, as every president has for many decades now, that presidents always believe they have inherent legal authority as commander-in-chief, and they don't need to go to a pesky Congress every time they want military force.
You know, Fareed Zakaria, if that guy could have sex with this cruise missile attack, I think he would do it. Brian Williams seemed to just be in true love with the cruise missile strike and in a despicable way invoking Leonard Cohen's name. I mean, the media coverage has been atrocious, particularly, and this is across the board on every network, particularly when the strike is happening. It's like they're in awe of the cruise missiles. And look no further than Hillary Clinton, Bill Kristol, and Donald Trump once again being on the same team. When it comes to these kinds of wars, the elite of both parties just all get in line, and they absolutely love a cruise missile strike.
So here's what I'd do if I was president. I'd leave about 8,000 to 10,000 troops behind in Iraq to make sure ISIL doesn't come back. Are you okay with that?
I suppose. I guess I think, like most Americans, I'm pretty skeptical about starting an entire new war.
But you don't want
given
ISIL
the track record of the wars that you've supported so far, has been, I think most people would say, abysmal.
Here's what